Hello, everybody. Uh, Welcome back to the channel. I hope that everybody is doing well. Um, uh, Appreciate you guys sticking around and continue watching the content. If you like non-biased political coverage regarding upcoming elections throughout the United States, I suggest you subscribe and like the video and the channel. With that being said, let's get into the topic. So, I've done a lot of predictions about how different elections are going to go, different U.S. Senate races. However, it's important to this video. We're basically going to be looking at what do the polls say. Now, polls don't say everything because they're not the most accurate things in the world, but they give a good picture of where the environment is going and where everything is going. So this is not an official prediction. This is just the U.S. Senate forecast. Who's going to control the United States Senate? Who's going to win? Who's going to win which election based on the polling data that we have? So I got a map right here. This is basically going to show what every state is doing. Now, we'll start with the safe Democratic states that Democrats are winning by over 10. That really shouldn't be a problem for them at all. New Mexico Democrat incumbent is running unopposed, so he shouldn't really have much of a problem. These states, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, should be safe. Not really much of a problem. Illinois is safe. Um, New Jersey, Delaware are safe. That is probably about it with the U.S. Senate elections. Um, Again, not much new things. I think Illinois will still be over 10. If we look at the data right here, you do have Senator Durbin is retiring, so obviously it's the polling here is kind of outdated, but it shows the Democrats should be ahead by at least quite a bit since it is a blue state and will be probably a bluer environment. Just because we have a Republican administration, the political environment is like a pendulum, so it kind of swings back and forth. So this year is probably going to be more favorable to the Democrats this time around. Safe Republican states, unless a third party candidate gets in, should probably be a safe Republican, are Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and South Carolina. That's probably about it as of now. Not anything much new with that. Those states should probably not be that competitive just because of that. We do have some likely states, however, quite a bit. So we'll just start with the likely Democrat states. Minnesota is probably going to be their lieutenant governor, Penny Flanagan. She's not a super strong candidate. I think she'll underperform the governor's margin behind Amy Klobuchar, but I think that she'll be able to win probably around 6 points, maybe even more. It depends. Well, that's likely. Another likely state is Virginia. It showed Mark Warner up by 7. However, that is an older poll against former Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin. He would be a very strong candidate, probably the only one that could pose a serious threat for Warner in Virginia, but Youngkin has decided to not run, so he'll probably win by over 10. But because it's the only poll, and I'm going by what the polling averages show for these elections, Virginia will be likely Democratic. That'll probably do it for likely. Actually, there is another likely state we have, which should most likely be Maine. So what's weird about Maine is that the Democrats have to get through a primary. So if Janet Mills, the governor, is the nominee, polling shows that Susan Collins would have a much better chance at winning re-election. But if it's against Graham Plattner, he probably will be able to get his base to turn out. Polling shows him up by 7 on the average against Susan Collins. Now, it's really hard to say what the margins are going to be or who's going to win, but so far it shows Plattner up against Susan Collins, and betting markets show him winning the primary. So it's going to be a very interesting race in Maine, but so far that's what the polling averages show. Let's go to the likely Republican states. Probably have a lot to get through. It doesn't, unfortunately, we don't have much polling for a lot of these states, but I think Florida is going to be over 10 as well. Just because of that. Same with a lot of these other states. I'd say Texas, another state, probably going to be just barely under 10. It does only show Cornyn up by a few points, though. That is going to be lean Republican. Well, we'll have to see how the margins end up playing out in Texas, but that's going to go down to lean. Not much likely. I just show Nebraska at that likely, just because you have an independent candidate running, but not a lot of polling out of there. Same with Iowa, another likely Republican state. Not that much polling out of Iowa. I assume Alaska. Alaska's actually going to save that for later. That's actually a lot more competitive. That's probably about it. Then we start to get into the more competitive territory. We'll start off with lean blue states, New Hampshire. I think that John Sununu will be the Republican nominee against Representative Chris Pappas, who's the Democrat running. If it was Scott Brown, it'd probably be likely a safe, but Sununu is a stronger candidate than Scott Brown, so I think that he'll be able to make this race closer, as close as it can get, really, for this environment and time being. So according to polling, it's about likely Democrat. We'll have to see how the margin ends up being at the end, but it sure currently shows Pappas up by around 3 or 4 points currently. Alaska, again, not a ton of polling out of Alaska, unfortunately. We will really have to see how that goes. I could possibly look it up right here. Polling average, however, again, not a ton of polling that has came out of the race, but it does show that it should get a lot more interesting because you do have Mary Peltola running as the Democratic nominee. Dan Sullivan is the senator running again, currently right now. But we'll get back to Alaska in just a minute. We do have some lean Republican states. Ohio only shows John Husted up by around a point. He's going against Sherrod Brown, which is a strong candidate. We'll definitely have to see how that race ends up panning out. I still think Husted's the favorite at the end of the day, but the race could get tightened considerably if the environment for the Democrats is strong enough. Another election is Michigan, right here. This is proving to be another interesting race, but polling shows McMorrow ahead now as the Democrat nominee, so we're going to assume it's McMorrow versus Rogers, and Rogers versus McMorrow, Republican Mike Rogers is winning the polls by 1 point. So this would be lean Republican again. And this map is not an official prediction. This is just according to what the polling average shows. I'm using Real Clear Politics up here. They usually seem to be good with gathering various polls around the U.S. following U.S. elections. Again, unfortunately, not a lot of polls out of Alaska. It does show Peltola actually doing kind of well. A lot of them are Democratic sponsors, so you do have to keep that in mind. But it basically shows are up by probably around lean Democratic. Again, this is not an official prediction. This is just based on what polling shows. Alaska is a quirky state, so it is kind of hard to say how that's going to end up resulting. But I still think Sullivan is favored to win. But with Peltola running, definitely could be a competitive election up in Alaska. Two southern states, both are going to the Democrats. Ossoff is up by around 4 points. It's probably going to be an uphill climb for whoever Republican wins that. It's probably going to be Mike Collins, but we'll have to see. Ossoff is probably ahead by 4. And then probably the bigger surprise is North Carolina. According to polling, Roy Cooper is up by 8 points, who was the former governor of North Carolina as a Democrat. He's a strong candidate, so that should help. I don't think he'll quite win by a likely margin. I think it'll be probably around 3 or 4. But according to polling, he's doing pretty well. We'll have to see how that election turns out. But this is basically who is ahead in the polling aggregate in these elections. So hope you enjoyed the video. Appreciate you watching. Definitely stick around for more unbiased election content. But until then, I'll see you in the next video.